there, and welcome to another FireRiffs video. We're going to be doing a little baking. I haven't done a baking video in a while, and I thought it's time I do one. And there's a recipe I've been wanting to do for a long time on here. You know, after doing 2 whole recipes in the past, but I've been wanting to do this one for a while. One of my favorite things that I bake, one of my favorite recipes. I mean, I like cheesecake. I like chocolate chip cookies. Those are great. Whoopie pies. If you don't know what a whoopie pie is, first of all, where have you been your whole life? But if you don't know what a whoopie pie is, it's 2 chocolate cakes, like round chocolate cakes, with a filling inside, usually like a marshmallow frosting kind of filling, which is what we're going to be doing today. I've done variations on the filling where I put like peppermint in it or wintergreen to give it a little different taste. We're just going to go with generic vanilla. I think that's going to be really good. So I'm going to give you a link to the recipe in the description. I got it off Epicurious, and I'm old-fashioned. I get it printed out. I got a whole bunch of recipes printed out from the internet. So I guess a little mix of old-fashioned and new-fashioned, you know? This is a really good recipe. I searched for a few recipes for this before I found one that I really liked. So for this recipe, you're gonna need obviously flour. You know, cake. You need flour, brown sugar. And in fact, this recipe for the cake only uses brown sugar. There's no white sugar in it, which I think adds to the taste quite a bit. I like brown sugar. You're gonna need some baking soda. You're gonna need some cocoa powder. The recipe calls for Dutch process, and it is good. But if you just have regular cocoa powder like this, it'll work. It'll work just fine. It'll still taste good. It's just a little different alkaline level, a little bit like the Dutch process, I think, is dark chocolate too. But either one's great. In fact, I only have a little Dutch process left, the special dark Dutch process, and then I got a canister of regular. So I'm going to be using a little of both. Again, for this recipe, it's not going to be a big deal, and it's going to still taste great. In fact, more times than not, I've done it with regular cocoa as opposed to the Dutch process. Okay, you're going to need some unsalted butter. For baking, unless the recipe says otherwise, you should use unsalted for a couple of reasons. One, salt affects leavening. And that's going to affect how, so if you're going to be adding salt later, which you will, or especially if you don't want salt in it, that could impact the leavening. It may not be a big deal. You might get by with it, but you're better off using unsalted. Also, it controls your salt levels. If you're concerned about getting too much salt, you know, because the sugar isn't a problem, of course. If you're concerned about getting too much salt, this way, with unsalted butter, you know exactly how much salt is going in your recipe. Salted butter can vary how much salt's in it. Again, stick with that. And you're going to get this butter to room temperature, and you need buttermilk. You're going to need a cup of buttermilk, and of course, eggs. Those are in the fridge. We'll get to those when we get to that. Oh, and of course, vanilla. Vanilla. You're going to need vanilla. What good baking recipe doesn't use vanilla, right? Get this recipe started. So you're going to do your dry ingredients first, and you're going to start. Let's see. You got 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a half a cup of cocoa powder, 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking soda, and a teaspoon of salt. Now, one thing to note for buttermilk, there is powdered buttermilk on the market. Sacco does powdered buttermilk, and it does work. Now, the advantage to that is, for example, for me, I never finish a quart of buttermilk that I buy for this. I can only buy it in quarts. I never finish it, and I end up throwing away 3 cups of buttermilk half the time because I don't have anything else to use it for. I used to get the powdered buttermilk. They used to sell it in packets. So 1 packet would be equal to a cup of buttermilk. Now they only have canisters. And again, same problem with this. I'll never use it all before it turns into a rock. So I figure I might as well just use this, because once the powder, plus last time I tried the canister of powdered buttermilk, it was hard when I got it. It works great. Like, the packets work great, but it was hard when I got it. But if you're using the Sacco dry buttermilk, you're going to put the dry buttermilk in with the dry ingredients. So in this stage with the flour and the cocoa. And then when you get to the wet ingredients, where it calls for buttermilk, you're going to put a cup of water in. And that's going to give you the moisture for the buttermilk. And you'll get, again, you get the acidity from the buttermilk from the powder. And it does work. It works great. I've never noticed any appreciable difference between the two. Again, maybe I'm not a connoisseur enough to notice the difference, but I haven't. So we're going to start out, get our measuring cups. We're going to start measuring our dry ingredients. First, you get 2 cups of flour. Well, if it's not powdered, I don't know what the heck you're doing. Okay. And half a cup of baking cocoa. So yeah, as I suspected, I'm a little under. So I'm going to be mostly Dutch processed cocoa in this, but I'm going to have a little not Dutch process. Again, it's okay. It really is. I'm going to show you, though, the difference in color. So you do know it's a darker chocolate. So this is the Dutch process. This is the regular. As you can see, the regular is a lot lighter. So you do get a bit of a bolder chocolate flavor with the Dutch process. It's special dark. So it's nice. It really is nice. But again, it's still going to taste really, really good, even with your regular cocoa powder. Add in there. 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking soda. So make sure your baking soda box has a little tab there that you can level off the spoon in. So if you're wondering, like, how do I make sure I get a level teaspoon? It's built right into the box. And a teaspoon of salt. Just regular salt. It's not kosher salt, just regular salt. If you do have kosher salt and you want to use it, it's going to measure differently, and I don't have those conversions for you, but I'm sure you can find them on the internet. But you just use regular salt. It's fine. Now, the recipe says whisk. Don't break your whisk trying to whisk dry ingredients. Whisks are for putting air into things. You can just stir these together to make them nice and blended so that they all go into your final recipe nice and evenly distributed. Okay, so that's nicely blended together. Now, see, there you go. All nice and blended together. Okay, so next you're gonna measure your buttermilk and your vanilla, and you're gonna mix those separately, and you can just do those in the measuring cup. You're gonna get your buttermilk. You're gonna measure a cup of buttermilk. Make sure you shake it up well. Buttermilk settles, so definitely make sure you shake it, or else all the good stuff's gonna be at the bottom of the box. Good shake. We're gonna measure out 1 cup of buttermilk. So let's see, we're gonna use 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Give that a little stir. And we'll put that aside. The rest of our recipe. I'll put my cocoa out of my way too. Okay. And now we're gonna get to our wet ingredients. We're gonna cream our butter and sugar together. So it says beat together. The recipe says beat together brown sugar in a bowl with brown sugar and butter in a bowl with an electric mixer at medium to high speed until pale and fluffy. So basically that means to cream it. They're using easier words. You can say cream it. Instead of saying cream it, so people who aren't bakers know what it's supposed to look like. But that's what they're going for. So 1 stick of butter, 1 stick of unsalted butter. And we're going to do a cup of brown sugar. Make sure it's not granulated brown sugar. Make sure it's regular brown sugar. They do make granulated. It's not going to measure the same. Cup of packed brown sugar. So brown sugar, you don't just kind of put it in loose. You pack it down nice and tight. So you make sure you measure that properly. Make sure you're using your brown sugar. Don't substitute granulated brown sugar unless you know how to convert the measurements. Use regular brown sugar. Okay, so that and our mixer. And I'm going to move the camera onto the mixer in a moment so you can see what's going on. Okay, you're not going to be able to see my face for this, but, well, that's probably a relief for you anyways. Break that brown sugar up a little bit. Bowl up to the beaters, and we're going to go at about mid-speed. So this is 10-speed mixer, so I do it about speed number 6, because, 5, 6. 6 is considered the creaming. And this is a KitchenAid Pro mixer. So if you have the tilt head one, it's got a little less power. You might have to go a little longer than I'm going to cream the butter. nice and pale and fluffy. Okay, that's good. And with any cake, thing like this with cake or any baking thing, you never want to overmix. You want to mix it just till it's where you want it. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. That is our pale and fluffy brown sugar and butter mixed together. And now we're going to add our egg. Add an egg until combined well. And just to be sure, we're just going to scrape down the sides of our bowl. Make sure that our stuff's all where the beaters are, so everything gets mixed nicely. Spatula there. And yes, I'm bad. I'm breaking the egg right over the bowl, so just be careful you don't get any shells in it. Okay, so we're going to beat that egg again just till it's blended. So I'm going to do that on the creaming level again. A little bit more. It doesn't look like it's quite there yet. Okay, how do I know whether I want to reduce the speed of the mixer or not? A good recipe will tell you. So the next step is reduce speed to low and alternately mix flour and buttermilk in batches, beginning and ending with flour, scraping down sides again until smooth. So, again, I'm just going to quick scrape down, make sure everything's in the middle where the beaters are. There's our brown sugar, our butter, and our egg all blended together. Now that, it doesn't look super appetizing like that, I know, but that's fine. It's going to be good when we're done. Okay, so now we're going to alternately add our dry ingredients. That's our flour, our cocoa, our salt, our baking soda, and our buttermilk with vanilla mixed in. We're going to do those alternating until it's well mixed. We're going to begin out with flour. I think the main reason for this is so you don't get a big cloud of flour come up in your face. So, the water keeps it down and it blends it more gradually. We're going to do that at a lower speed. We're going to do that I'm going to do it at 2. Maybe 1. We'll see how it looks. So let's put this on 2 and start adding our put our flour in. And there's no set amount that you put in each. You just kind of alternate as you go. Down our sides a bit. That and some of the dry mix is sitting on top of the beater. I'm going to get that into the mix. Okay, that's almost mixed. We're just going to scrape down the sides. Make sure that all powder that's sitting on the top of the beaters that don't go into the mixture all the way is knocked into the mixture. And we'll give it a little brief run just to blend that in. And we will be all set with blending this. One more quick blend. Get that all mixed in there thoroughly. Again, just till it's blended, which it is. That is our mixed batter. Nice and dark brown that is, nice and smooth. Now that we have that all nice and blended, we're going to clean up a little space. I don't have counters, and we're going to start getting it ready to go in the oven to bake. Okay, so our next step, look at the camera, Scott. Our next step is going to be to get these cakes ready for the oven. We've got our oven preheating at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You can convert that to Celsius if you're outside the U.S. You convert all these measurements to metric if you're outside the U.S. We real Americans are still using the imperial system over here. This is about quarter cup mounds. A little hard to measure with the measuring cup. I use this old ice cream scoop. It does a good job. They come out big the way I do it. You can, of course, make them different sizes, but I've always made them with this. Comes out good. And I measured it before, and it holds about a quarter of a cup. So these are meant to be big suckers. If you look at these when you're done, you say, these things are huge. I think that's pretty much how they're meant to come out. And they're really, really good. It says to do it on a greased cookie sheet. I prefer using parchment paper. 1, less cleanup. 2, less likely to burn. I found when I grease cookie sheets, stuff burns at the bottom, burns more easily. If you use parchment paper, you don't have that problem. So we're going to make our scoops, and it says to put them about 2 inches apart. So on these baking sheets, I have these nice little air baking sheets. I can fit about 5 on a sheet. So I'm going to do that. I try to measure it the same every time because you want your cakes to match. So you want to try to make all of them the same amount. Another reason why you want to use some kind of scoop where you know that it's going to be a consistent measurement. In this case, this ice cream scoop's going to do. You can use a quarter cup measuring cup if you want. I just think that's I feel like that's going to be a little more difficult than just using something like this with a longer handle on it. I have scooped out 2 pans of the cakes. So there's 1. There's 2. I'm going to put them in the oven. Now, this has very specific instructions for how you're going to bake these. You don't just stick them in. So you're going to set your racks to the upper and lower thirds. And then you're going to bake them for, I think it's 12 to 13 minutes. 11 to 13 minutes. Okay, so you're going to bake them for 11 to 13 minutes, but halfway through, you're going to swap racks. This is all about the way the heat circulates in the oven and stuff. So, disclaimer: know your oven. Okay, don't just put it in for the longest time and think it'll be fine. Don't put it in for the shortest time and pull it out and think it's fine. Know your oven. If you don't know how long your oven takes to bake, some ovens run on the high side, some run on the low side. So, like some ovens, you might need the whole 13 minutes. Other ovens, you might only need the 11 minutes. And other ovens, you might need 12 minutes, somewhere in between. Know your oven. You're better off putting it in at the low time, checking it, and putting it back in for longer than running it for the full time and burning them. You know, you can always bake it more. You can't unbake it. You can't unburn the cakes. So I know my oven. My oven, it always takes 13 minutes. So I'll do it 6.5 minutes, swap it another 6.5 minutes. So let me show you the oven setup. You can see we got a low one and a higher one. And we're going to swap them halfway through. So I usually stagger them off from each other, like so, on the upper and lower racks. Put it in. And I set my timer for 6.5 minutes. And when that 6.5 minutes is up, I'm going to swap them and do them for another 6.5 minutes. Put them on my racks, put my next batch in. I only have a little bit left, so I'll probably only get a couple more cakes in. So if your second batch, now again, this is all depends on how big you're making your cakes. I'm making mine pretty big. So if you get to a batch where you don't put dough on both trays, still put both trays in the oven, still swap them to make sure the heat is circulating in the oven properly, and that these are baking properly for the type of cake that they are. Okay, so if you got one tray, don't just put one tray in and think, oh, I got one tray, I can stick it in by itself, I don't even need to swap it, or I'll swap it. Put both in and swap it appropriately. Okay, so our first 3.5 minutes are up. Swap these around. Set another timer for 3.5 minutes. And again, your oven may vary. So, for you, start at the shortest time. And you say, well, what about the half and half? It's okay if it's not absolutely perfect. Usually, once you've done the first batch, you'll know for the future batches. When you take them out, like with any cake, to make sure it's done, take a toothpick or a cake tester and stick it in the middle of the cake and pull it out and make sure it comes out clean. By clean, I mean, no batter. A couple of crumbs is not a big deal. They're moist cakes. You don't want any batter coming out. If it comes out with batter on them, then you're going to put them in a little longer. And I would say just do it little increments just to make sure. This isn't something that's going to fall like a cheesecake or a sponge cake. So you're okay with kind of like putting it back in and out. So we're going to wait for that, and then we'll pull them out, and we'll see what they look like. And that's our second 3.5 minutes. Isn't time travel wonderful? Let's pull those out. Then I've done these enough times that I know in this oven they're done. Ooh! Even through my elbow glove, they are very, very, very hot. Okay. I should have left that one aside, my bad. Sorry, these are so fucking hot. I'm gonna get those scooped and then I'll give you a look at them. Yeah, I got a limited space here, so it's a little hard to show you as much as I'd like and the detail I'd like. That is our finished cake. That's batch number 1. Don't they look good? All right, and that's batch number 1. I'm going to scoop up the next batch. Like I said, I only got a couple left. And then we're going to fill these. Now, before you fill them, you want to let them cool completely. And it's perfectly okay. If you don't have time in one day to do them, if you got a busy day, you can put them in an airtight container once they're cooled, and you can make the filling tomorrow. That's what I'm going to do because I'm running out of time today. But I'm going to make the filling tomorrow. But yeah, you scoop them, you put them on a tray, you let them fully cool, and then we're going to make the filling, and then we're going to put them in our container, and we're going to be good. So that's going to be a day for me, but for you, it's going to be right about now. So We're gonna start making our frosting. You need yourself a good bowl, obviously. You're gonna need a cup and a quarter of confectionery sugar. I have a canister of confectionery sugar here. I'm gonna measure out. You need 2 cups of marshmallow fluff or some kind of marshmallow cream. Marshmallow fluff is the local brand, so that's what I use. And of course, you're gonna need some vanilla to flavor it, to give it a nice vanilla flavor. And you're gonna need 1 stick of unsalted butter. Alright, so 1 stick of unsalted butter, and you're gonna soften, make sure this is softened. You know, room temperature should be good. One thing I didn't mention before, if in the last part of the video, if you forgot to soften your butter, forgot to leave it out for a while, you can soften in the microwave on like 10% power. My microwave, it's about a minute. Your microwave may vary. I'd say start out low time, work your way up, but about 10% power, and you should be able to avoid like melting your butter completely. And it's basically like making a frosting. It's a little heavier than than your usual frosting because it is going between cakes of something you're going to pick up. You don't want it oozing out. Another thing about these whoopie pies is I usually don't make them in hot, humid weather because the filling has a tendency to get soft and runny in hot weather. So it's kind of like an unfortunate side effect of these things. If it's hot and humid, they're kind of a mess. I mean, they still taste great, but they're going to be really messy. If you don't mind the mess, go ahead and make them. But yeah, they're going to be quite the mess. So start measuring our ingredients. So I don't have to use more than 1 measuring cup. I'm going to start measuring also known as powdered sugar, if that's what you call it. So this will make enough. You don't really need to make more. It'll make it. It looks like when you're making, especially if you mix it in a big bowl, it doesn't look like much, but it's plenty for the number of whoopie pies you should be getting from this recipe. So don't worry if it looks like it's not enough. It'll make it. Again, I'm using a big bowl. I usually do just so I have plenty of room. So every time I do it, it looks like, oh, that's not going to be enough. And I'm like, no, you've made this before. You know it's enough. So marshmallow fluff, you're going to do 2 cups. Now, the big jars say it's 5 cups, and those are 16-ounce jar. I can't remember what the 7-ounce jars say. Fluff's funny now. When you measure it out in the cup, even though this says like let's say you got the small jar and it says it's like 2 cups or 3 cups, it's very easy to push the air out of it as you put it in the cup, and you won't get 2 cups out of it. But there's enough in a jar. I think there's enough in a small jar actually for 2 cups. It's just that when you try to measure it, you smush the air out of it. You know, when you try to measure it, you smush all the air out, and then you're wondering, why don't I have enough? And you actually do. But I've done that, and I've opened up another jar, and the filling still came out well. But you don't have to open up another jar. You should have enough in that 1 jar for 2 cups. You should have more than enough in one of these big jars for 2 cups. Now, something you can do with these, if you want, is you can actually make different flavors. The standard is just vanilla, which is what I'm going to do now. But like I've done peppermint whoopie pies for Christmas time. And I just get a little peppermint extract and I put that in there. I usually add it to taste. I couldn't even give you an exact measurement. I put it in until the frosting tastes pepperminty to me. You know, I just take a little taste of it. Oh yeah, that's good. And I imagine if you want like a double chocolate whoopie pie, you could put a little cocoa powder in like you use for baking them to flavor it. Not too much because then you'll make it awful stiff. But you know, that's something you could do. I'm sure that would be good. I haven't tried doing that, but I'm sure it'd be really, really good. But it's going to be a lot of chocolate because the cakes are super chocolatey. Like this here, what I've measured here, it's kind of concave and it doesn't look like a full cup, but I probably knocked a lot of air out pulling out. Plus, it's a bit of an older jar, so it might be a little deflated anyways. So this is probably a full cup, and it's just deflated. Put that in there. I think the hardest part, honestly, of making the filling is just measuring the fluff because it sticks so hard. Trying to get it off the spatula into the cup, then out of the cup into the bowl. It's just messy. It's messy as all. Yeah, if you don't like getting messy, like sticky while you're making stuff, this probably isn't the recipe for you. You're gonna get marshmallow on your hands. It comes off easy. Okay, next we're gonna do our teaspoon of vanilla. Give it a nice little vanilla taste. Um, if you get a little extra, it's okay. I just measure right over it, and if I get a little extra in, it's no big deal. Just a little extra vanilla flavor. Teaspoon of vanilla. Now, things with cinnamon, I always put extra cinnamon in. If it calls for a teaspoon, you're probably getting 2 teaspoons. I just shovel the thing in there and just take out a pile, and you get what you get. And I love cinnamon, so it works. Okay, next you're going to add your stick of softened butter. Make sure it's softened. If it's hard, you're probably going to have problems mixing it. Softened, not melted. Melted is not what you want. Now, if you get a good hand mixer, you should be able to mix it with a hand mixer, no problem. If your hand mixer is not too powerful, if you're not sure, use a stand mixer. Don't risk burning out your mixer. This is a good mixer. I know it's powerful. I've done this with this before, so I know it can handle it. But I had a weaker mixer that I actually burnt out the motor trying to mix this, trying to get through the fluff. Okay, so I'm not gonna be able to pull this off without cutting off part of my head. It's just my position. It's just my kitchen. I don't have the room. Okay, so we're gonna give this a good mix. Now, contrary to what you may think, the highest setting may not necessarily be the best to power through something heavy. Because that's another way you could burn out the motor. So start out at a low setting and see how you do there before you turn it up. In fact, I would say maybe a medium, like creaming, would be ideal, since you've got butter and sugar together anyway. It's gonna look like it's not gonna make it, like it's not gonna be moist enough, but it will. Once it blends, it will be nice and smooth. You may have to scrape your bowl down every now and then. But yeah, the fluff actually has enough moisture in it between the fluff and the butter to make it nice and smooth. It just takes a while to get that consistency. Once it starts to soften up, you can turn up your mixer a bit. Plow through it faster. You just don't want to start it out at a high speed. Okay, and that should do it. Just scrape off our beaters here, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, that that is our finished filling. All nice and whipped up. It should be nice and smooth. It's not going to be watery. That'd be bad. It should be nice and smooth. It should be thicker. It should be thicker than a frosting, but it should be thicker. Yeah, it should be thicker than a frosting, but it should be not as thick as the marshmallow. Now, when I was looking for recipes for these, I found recipes that had you like melting marshmallows for the middle. Like, no, that's not right. I mean, if you want lousy whoopie pies, you can do that, but or you could do it right and make a proper filling. So now take our cakes that we made the day before, and I seal them up in this nice Tupperware airtight container, or maybe it's Rubbermaid, whatever. Um, so I have a total of 12 cakes, which will make 6 whoopie pies. And the way I store them, I should have probably told you this yesterday. Um, First of all, they're very moist, so you don't want to put them on top of each other. They'll stick to each other. I usually take a piece of parchment paper, put it on the bottom of the container so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the container. Lay down a layer, then put a piece of parchment paper on top of that, and then put the rest another layer on top of that. That way they don't stick to each other. Like I said, they're very moist. They'll stick very easily, especially like this plastic container. They'll stick to each other. In fact, when you make them, they even stick a little bit to the rack. Not too much, but you know, you can have a little residue on the racks. So you're gonna lay these out on a rack, or a couple of racks actually. I'm gonna have to do. And you're gonna pair them up and fill them. Ideally, you got cakes that are all the same size, but they might have come out odd sizes. So I suggest before you start putting frosting in anything, pair up like ones that are close in size or the same size if they're different sizes, just to make sure. Yeah, just to make sure that they match, so you don't have stuff oozing out the edges. Like I said, these are pretty much all the same size. I think I had like one that was a little big because it was like the last of the filling on the last of the cake batter, and it wasn't going to be enough to make another cake, so I just used it all. But not by much. It should pair. So I am going to lay these out, and then we're going to fill these. That is making whoopie pies, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope if you tried this recipe, leave a comment down below, all 2 of you watching this, and let me know how they came out. If you're curious, and like I said, I'll leave a link in the description with to the recipe so that you can find it and follow along with it. I mean, I read all the ingredients out, but it's good to have it written down in front of you. And that should conclude this, and I hope, like I said, I'll try to make some more baking videos in the future. Otherwise, you're going to see more riffs. And of course, more content for Riffoween. I got 2 more weeks of that left. I'm still going to find a 5th short, but that's okay. We'll get it. Yeah, and also remember to check out some of my scripted riffs on FireRiffs.com. I got a new one up for sale, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Link in the description that you can go check out. It's relatively inexpensive, you know, for a whole movie that took me about 1.5 years to script the riffs for, and it's much better than the improv live riff that I did of it. That was a train wreck. If you saw it, just scrub it from your brain and watch this. It's better. Thank you, and have a good one.